Welcome everybody to our special Zoom forum, Saving the Byron Carlyle, presented by Mdpl in collaboration with the neighborhood organization to save North Beach. My name is Daniel Ciraldo. I'm the executive director here at the Miami Design Preservation League. And we have a very distinguished panel of guest speakers and panelists that we're going to be introducing individually. Here you'll see their names and titles. Before we do that, we wanted to hear from two people who are very important with the organization that we're working with. So first, I'm going to play a video from Mr. Manning Salazar.
Hey everyone, it's Manning from No Snob. And behind me, you can see our beloved landmark Byron Carlyle Theater that's been with us for over 50 years. Thank you so much for being here and for helping us save our theater, our only cultural institution in North Beach. We're convinced that we can save the Byron Carlyle for the benefit of the whole community. And saving it has overwhelming community support. An online petition put together by Novi News has close to 1,000 signatures, and every day there's more. We'll be distributing a link to the petition during the forum. Please sign the petition and spread the word. At No Snob, we think that what we're doing to save the Byron Carlyle is an important milestone for things to come. Because for too long, North Beach has been the forgotten and neglected stepchild of the rest of Miami Beach. We need to come together as a community to save our neighborhood. It only takes 2 commissioners, 2, to save the Byron Carlyle. So please, reach out to your elected officials and tell them you want to save the Byron Carlyle and you want to control runaway development for the benefit of our community. Thank you.
Great, thank you Manning for that. And now we would like to hear from Nancy Liebman. So I'm gonna unmute you. Nancy, are you there?
All right, I'm
Welcome.
unmuted. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Welcome and a million thanks to all of you who are here visiting with us and our fabulous speaker group. This is the most educated, articulate group that you will meet in Miami for a long time. The forum is being presented by Mdpl and the Neighborhood Association to Save North Beach. Our forum is to encourage each and every one of you to help save this historic icon. Yes, it is not a historic site, but it should be and it could be. We can and we will make this into a cultural addition that will energize North Beach's future. Unfortunately, the city is trying to give, got that word, give away the Byron for free. No, big trade, give away Byron. And they are encouraged, unfortunately, they're encouraged by several commissioners and of course, some developers. The North Beach plan states, quote, "There shall be no net loss of publicly owned land to private entities." I hope the commission realizes this. Today, you will be hearing from, as I said before, a brilliant group of panelists. And they are here to awaken you to make North Beach become a great place again. I say that because that's how it was when I lived there and raised my children many, many years ago. It was the best place in Miami. So I look forward to hearing from you now. Thank you again for coming and doing this.
Thank you so much, Nancy. So before we hand it off to our esteemed panelists, I wanted to take a trip to the Mdpl Archives and share some things that our wonderful archivist Mireille Shama has uncovered. Here we see a view of the Byron Carlyle during its 45th year anniversary. And then we found some old images of the Byron, and there was a plaque that was placed there in 1968, and maybe some of our friends in the comments can tell us if it's still there, but it was given by Jackie Gleason to the Byron Carlyle Theater, and we're not sure if it's still there. Here's more of a recent view when O Cinema was there. O Cinema was a steward of the property for a long time after the city purchased it. And as far as historical elements, there's some interesting concrete block structure with some geometric MIMO style details on the Byron side of the street. But we uncovered also this article from 1968 that shows the center in its original design with that block that we just saw, and then with a thin horizontal band. And then on the right side was actually a bas-relief of meant to be symbolic of Miami Beach that was made of plastic. It looks like that has been removed since, but we see here it was referred to as a Byron and Carlyle Twin Theater, which was the latest addition to the giant Wometco chain in South Florida. This advertisement we got from Mickey Wolfson's archives. Thank you, Mickey. Mickey, as we all know, his family owned Wometco, and they were the ones that built the Byron. And so they had this advertisement from 1969, comparing it to a car. We all know the 60s was the big age of the automobile. And look at the Byron. This is probably a planning person's nightmare today, but they advertise, hey, you could actually drive here and there's parking. And so at the time, that was a very modern thing to do. And so over here, sort of where Prima Pasta is, there on the bottom left, and there was that parking lot. Then there was a parking lot to the south. And then as we see here, the kind of the layout of the theater, and again, they were two twin theaters. So there was a Byron on Byron Avenue and the Carlyle facing Carlyle Avenue. Now the Byron Theater, that footprint is the only area now that was sort of used, and that was used by O Cinema, because the Carlyle Theater had been closed due to some issues with maintenance and other things. Here is a photo from the opening. And they had a very high-tech projector, as you could see, and probably in the 60s this was on the cutting edge, and now of course a lot of the videos and movies we could see on our phone in our hands, but at the time this was very cutting edge. Here's another good article we found that talked again about the ideal atmosphere for this twin theater, incorporating modern concepts of construction and furnishing, and another look at the facade where we see more of the original design. Some of us who were around, I wasn't around at that time, but growing up here in Miami Beach, I remember when they had the trees planted on each side, and they also had, here you see the side of the marquee that was fit in on that corner, and then that horizontal banding with Byron closer to Byron Avenue, and then Carlyle over by that twin theater. And this article is really interesting. We'll post it on our blog, but it talks about, you know, the finest cutting edge hypoallergenic fabric, which was a trend then. You know, you couldn't have a modern theater without hypoallergenic, which frankly, maybe even today is still very important. So the premiere of the Byron Carlyle was attended by Jackie Gleason, and it was the showing of his film, Skidoo, It Takes Two. So if anyone's seen that, let us know in the comments. I actually watched it over the weekend. It is, I guess the one word I would use to describe it, psychedelic. And it features Carol Channing, Jackie Gleason, Frankie Avalon, Groucho Marx. And it was a very interesting film of that time. And so I learned a lot just from that. I did want to mention that we always want to reach out to our community partners, and we did talk to O Cinema, and Kareem Topsh, and Vivian Martel, I think maybe on the line. I want to say hello and thank you. They did make this statement that we'll also post to our blog, but essentially that you know, they want to take the opportunity to reiterate their commitment to North Beach, and that they want to be part of the present and future of North Beach and honor its past. And for 5 years, O Cinema brought affordable and accessible independent foreign art films into North Beach every night of the week, every week of the year, and they want to do that again. And so they're on the call today listening, and they know that they were very impressed, by the way, by that petition, and I'll put a link to that too. And a lot of people mentioned O Cinema and mentioned the Byron Carlyle as a real cultural you know, center of North Beach, and they really want to be a part of that discussion moving forward. So we thank them. I also want to recognize Commissioners Samuelin, Commissioner Minor is on. I see Eric Carpenter from the city. I see a lot of amazing people. Joel Hoffman, head of Vizcaya, thank you for coming. I can't read everyone's name, but I want to thank all of you for being part of the discussion. And without further ado now, I'd like to switch the screen over to Mr. Robert Geithner. And Robert is the executive director of the Olympia Theater. I'm going to stop sharing, and maybe that will help Robert. And while he's setting that up, I'm going to just mention that Robert is the executive director of the Olympia Theater. He is a native Floridian and a theater artist from Orlando who's been living in Miami for the last 26 years. And he also managed several hospitality businesses during the rebirth of South Beach in the 90s. So thank you for doing that. And he has been working with his partner, Terrell Fritz, with Fritz Geitner, and they work with community organizations, businesses, government leaders throughout Florida, helping them realize redevelopment and creative placemaking goals and objectives. So we'll all give a virtual clap to Robert, and Robert, take it away. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My remarks are, they're going to be more from setting up a course for the development of a cultural arts program in a community. And they're based on two very real and currently living in them situations. One, the Olympia Theater, those of you who know what it is, been around a long time may have remembered it as the Gusman Hall, which I work for a nonprofit that was started in 2011 to manage the facility on behalf of the city of Miami after the financial crisis and its losses were just crushing and they were going to close it. So we inherited a space that was in good shape, but had lost all of its clientele. It had 38 bookings for the year on the calendar. And our challenge, and still is my challenge today, is to find a way for this beautiful historic structure to remain relevant and capture the hearts and minds of the people who use it, who are younger. Our first rounds of, and we every couple of years have to go deal with a fight. The developer wants to take it over, and the institution thinks that they can do it better. But those hearts and minds, the people who care about the building, need to be around for generations to come, because all of our historic structures, no matter how protected they are, you know, if you're willing to pay the price and take the pain and become the villain, you can get rid of them. And that's something that's very, very important for everyone to sort of realize. On the flip side, my partner and I, Terrell Fritz, are working in the city of Pompano Beach. We've been working with them for a good 7 or 8 years now. And they started out with a redevelopment program and latched on very quickly to the arts and culture being an important part of anything that they were going to do as they redeveloped their old downtown and directly across Dixie, their historic African-American neighborhood. And that Dixie actually was the dividing line, and that's where the train tracks went through town, and the black people lived on one side of the tracks, and the white people had all their businesses and residences on the other side. So there's a very old Southern dynamic and a very agricultural-based community that today is well positioned for its proximity to 95. It's become a transportation center, distribution center, and it's attracting some innovative new ways of thinking about working in a new economy. So using those two things, I'm going to couch my remarks in sort of like what happens in planning a cultural facility. The first thing is, I lived in North Beach for about 5 years, just off of Normandy, and went to the Byron Carlyle. My partner's office at that point as the North Beach Development Corporation Executive Director was in the Byron Carlyle. So I'm familiar with the neighborhood and the dynamics and the struggles and the things that have been going on in the neighborhood. But from a purely cultural perspective thing, sometimes the historic preservation aspects and the cultural aspects don't always fully align themselves. And it's important in the process moving forward, especially if you're talking about the investment of building out a cultural arts facility, no matter where it goes, of getting the planning on that part of it right. Because they can coincide, they can be in the same place, and sometimes you may find that they may not be in the same place. So we tend to start every project that we approach when we're doing it on the front way in, using a needs analysis. And in a needs analysis that we work with a couple of different consultants who help us do it, we're looking at a couple of things. What is the cultural institution base for the community or the neighborhood that we're looking in? What's there? What already exists? 2, what types of facilities are in the area? 3, what types of facilities and cultural institutions might be in the competitive landscape? You know, you don't want to sort of build something shiny and new and then like wipe out another institution, especially in a city like Miami. Speaking on behalf of, from my days with the Olympia, you know, we watched as the New World Symphony space came online, and a lot of our smaller classical music performances just naturally drifted over to a facility that was built specifically for the presentation of music. And that had happened before as the Art Center and other things came online. So when those types of things happen in the community, you kind of want to be able to make adjustments for them and know they're going to happen and plan for them. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute while I do this next little bit of talking. So the contrast with, this is a picture of the interior of the Olympia. We all sort of remember it, know it. If you haven't been there, it's still the gorgeous lady that it always is, even though we haven't been able to have anybody in there since March, which is killing me. But it's a 1,570 seat auditorium. And when presenting, that presents some issues with terms of scale to unit house. There's a number of things that make it great for larger scale performances. But what was needed to integrate it back into the downtown fabric and get it on the radar and get people who live within 10 blocks of the theater. And keep in mind, there's about 70,000 people who live within 10 blocks of the Olympia Theater, was to find a new way to engage them. And so we basically, and if you look at the other pictures here, carved out a second venue in our lobby space. We flipped it into a cabaret space that comes up and goes down depending on what we're doing. And through that, we were able to start working with small and mid-sized performance groups, running a bunch of series of free and community programming that just becomes a neighborhood gathering spot, as well as some smaller presentations in that area. And sort of able to refit the Olympia so that it was reflective of the neighborhood. And I'll contrast that with Pompano Beach. Pompano Beach, when they started their cultural arts program, did their needs analysis, and they identified a number of things in the community that weren't really surfaced. Everybody who was talking about redevelopment was very much on the, we want a theater, we want this, we want that. But during the course of the needs analysis, what they did find that was completely underserved was space for visual artists to work at an affordable rate, and exhibition space that would work. And working with their CRA and their city government, in 2 buildings that are in the targeted area. They took a historic hotel, and I'm going to circle that one right here, and created the Bailey Center for Contemporary Art, BACA. And out of the guts of that small old hotel from the 20s and the teens are 12 studios that artists use, and they're constantly filled, and they have a program that lets people get into them. 2 exhibition spaces and some spaces that are conducive to social gathering. And out front in space, they built a wonderful new plaza with a fire sculpture in it that serves as a community gathering point. On the next level, and this is in the historic African American section of town, there was a boarding house. Cab Calloway, Dizzy Gillespie, those guys would stay there during the days of segregation when they were playing gigs in that general area. It's one of the very few remaining structures from that era in this neighborhood. And during that needs analysis, what was identified was some programmatic spaces that were specific and conducive to helping those groups, those artists in that neighborhood have a place to go. So the programmatic space build out for this includes working spaces for a few artists, larger gallery spaces, office for their historic society, the Rockwood Historical Society, and a courtyard patio that's equipped with a performance space that people use all the time. And if you out on the internet look for Soulful Sundays, you'll see some of the stuff that they do. They're even though they can't have people over, they're doing their programming in a virtual capacity. And out of all of that, while these projects were going on, what was identified was this mashup of a project. Pompano Beach was slated to get a new county library, but the cultural needs analysis pointed to a missing facility in there. With the preservation efforts and art starting to become a popular thing, the city and the CRA embarked on building out a performing arts cultural center that wraps around a branch library. It has a 5,000 square feet flexible space that works for theater and flat floor productions and dance productions. And its library. It's also equipped with a space for creating digital art, includes a multimedia digital center with equipment and setups for studio and audio recording, green screen, live streaming productions, and some classroom space for teaching classwork on how to use this equipment and training for a variety of kids and programs throughout the city who enroll in their camps that do that. So when we were able to start with a project where we had essentially a blank slate, we were able to identify need and sort of take project spaces and fit them into a full program that got us to, and this is their CRA district. This is their core level here. So right here, we see the Pompano Beach Cultural Arts Center. It's attached to the city campus right here. This is Old Town Pompano, which is what's left of their old downtown. And the BACA Contemporary Arts sits right on the edge of that, facing onto Atlantic Avenue. And then here's that divide I was talking about. And then over here is the Allied Cultural Arts Building, the preserved rooming house with courtyard patio for performance and everything. So that led to a project that was awarded an NEA grant that we labeled Pompano Beach Crossroads. And the goal of the project is using their robust public art program is to create an activity link that connects these facilities and some new ones that are planned and being developed now along a 1.5 mile stretch, and create this linkage that is literally crossing roads and connecting cultural arts activities in the heart of the center of Pompano Beach. So when we talk about these things, there were some tools and some things that worked. I see lots of parallels with the story of North Beach in terms of what you've got to work with there. And you've got some new tools that have come online that weren't there when I was there in the early aughts. You now have, a well thought and well regarded master plan for the area, which is great. That can help guide and steer vision throughout. And there's talk about forming a CRA and projects that combine preservation and cultural arts or projects that are cultural arts driven, period, CRAs are the perfect agency to take those challenges on, because they're there to realize the public benefit. And, you know, the only major actively ongoing cultural arts facility up there is the North Beach Band Shell, but there's a need for all sorts of different types of spaces. And when we look at space today, when we look at cultural arts, when we look at performing arts in particular, those days of building an Olympia Theater are over, gone, done. We're not going back. It's nice that we have one left. You know, it should be the only one. Today, you know, the big arts, the high arts, they're not what we and the generations that are following me look at to or engage with directly on a performing arts scale. It's mashups of symphonic music with great visuals and projections. It's dance that flips into film that becomes something else. And these types of spaces are not conducive, you know, traditional proceeding spaces are not conducive to presenting the wide variety and formats that come out of performing arts. Structures that are highly ornate and decorative don't always lend themselves to as the best spaces for exhibiting visual arts in any of the formats that are there. So when I look at a cultural arts project or a cultural arts program, I'm looking at it from a variety of points of view, but always looking forward and what's new and now, because those things that our younger folks are embracing, that they want to engage with, that's the next two generations. That's what keeps those buildings active. That's what keeps them programmed. That's what keeps them used. And from my point of view, you've got an opportunity to plan this out in a way where you've got something that has a lasting impact on the neighborhood of North Beach. And I'm kind of done with my preaching part, so I'll just hand it back to Daniel to.
Thank you. No, Robert, you gave us all a lot of food for thought. So thank you so much for that. And again, if anyone's watching that has questions, please add your questions into the Q&A. And our next speaker is Mireille Chancy Gonzalez, who is a co-founder of the Worldwide Photo and Carousel Studios that was in the design district, but also an avid art collector, and especially enjoys Cuban, Haitian, African, and modern art genres. She has served as VP of the Board of Trustees of Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, and on various boards such as the IWF, Partners for Artisans, and New World School of the Arts, and also the PAM. She is one of the founders of the Haitian Cultural Arts Alliance. If you haven't visited there, you have to go. It's amazing. She has been committed to helping the Haitian community through the arts and the preservation of historical documents. And so without further ado, let's all welcome Mireille. Thank you. Are you there? Oh, I think here, let me unmute. There you are.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Robert, for your beautiful presentation. I'm Mireille Chancy Gonzalez, as you know, and I've been very much, you know, I'm involved in the photography business. That's what I've done all my life through, you know, different stores and things like this. But also I've been involved doing a lot of things for the community and serving on various boards. And I got a lot of experience because, you know, as time goes, we have to be a trustee. There are certain tasks that you have to take care of. And I specialize a lot in the government type of representation for the institution. And, you know, with the commissioners, the mayors, and etc. And it's been very fascinating, and I really enjoyed that. But I have been, you know, the Vizcaya, as you all know, was one of a typical example. This is a property that belongs to the city, to Miami-Dade. And we decided that we would like to have, for it to become a nonprofit, because since it's been accredited as a museum, so therefore, we start all the preliminary thing, and we had a lot of resistance, but finally, you know, I was in that executive board as a secretary of the group, the group, and we got accepted, not accepted, but we are managing now the Vizcaya, and we are doing extremely well. So I had, you know, we had, as Nancy was saying, resistance, things, but after all, it all came through. So at PAM, we do also, you know, a lot of things that we are doing, and you know, there are variances all the time for changes, and you know, and every time you have to go through the right commissioners to see how things could change. But I'm the vice chair of the Miami-Dade Cultural Affairs Council, and we manage there a lot of non-profit that they are under the cultural affair. So the South Dade Cultural Center, we have the African Heritage Institution that is by Liberty City. We just undertook the Coconut Grove Theater that is still in you know, litigation, you know, for us to get. There are a lot of opposition, so we are still handling all these things and waiting if things is going to happen. But plus we run, I believe, the Central Theater and other institutions that we are doing with the cultural affair. And that's where, as I was telling Manny and Nancy, that's where, you know, when we do go, you know, to whichever city or Miami-Dade city Miami Beach, you know, I don't deal with them. I live in Bar Harbor, but, you know, I've never done anything with them. There is a way that we have to be together and have a lot of petition, and we have to present. We have one person who speak and you know, very eloquent, and to expose our demands for things to happen. I'm very delighted that I be part of this. If I could help, it would be very nice. So thank you very much for having me.
Great, thank you so much. And so our next speaker is going to be Beth Boone. And Beth is the Artistic and Executive Director of the Miami Light Project and founder of the Light Box at Goldman Warehouse. Since 1998, in her role as Artistic and Executive Director of the Miami Light Project, she has distinguished herself as a leader in Miami's cultural community, and she has developed critically acclaimed artistic programs that have asserted the organization as one of the leading cultural institutions in South Florida, and which have brought national recognition to her for her work in the field. So Beth, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here. I'd like to acknowledge Manning for being appropriately persistent in reaching out to me so that I would participate in this discussion. You know, I have just a couple of things that I want to say. First of all, I actually used to live in that neighborhood and very much enjoyed being able to walk, you know, to the sort of town center or the neighborhood center and see cultural, you know, experience cultural programming. But as a director of a cultural organization, I have utilized the Byron Carlyle Theater. I very much remember when Nancy was leading the effort to, I guess, I don't know all the particulars, but I guess that was when the city was purchasing the property and then converting it to a theater. And subsequently, Miami Light Project presented many shows there. Live theater as with artists from Miami, Teo Castellanos D projects, but also we presented artists from around the world. And we had Will Power, who is a California-based activist theater artist, and we had a company from Japan, a theater company from Tokyo that we presented there. We presented several films there. We are collaborators with many organizations, inclusive of O Cinema. So the Byron Carlyle is a meaningful space to me, both on a personal and a professional level. You know, it didn't, in my discussions with Manning, you know, the thing that I really spent my time, I guess, sharing with him in terms of my thought process about this effort is that, you know, for a city that stakes its reputation on being a cultural center, a place that is friendly toward culture, a place that is celebratory of diverse cultures, for them to sort of summarily, literally give away a space to developers in an unbridled fashion, I find egregious. And so, you know, it doesn't matter that I don't live in that neighborhood anymore or that I program more at the Lightbox than, for example, at the Byron Carlyle. However, we will continue to program there if, you know, if the space is available to us. So I'm glad to see that there's such a community outpouring. I wanted to mention, I believe that it's Ariana who had put the petition together. Yes, is that right? And she wrote me an email about signing it and I forgot. And so then when you sent the link just now, Daniel, I signed it. So nothing like the present moment to get this things done. But I would just like to say that I think it's clear by the people who have come to the table to give their time toward this effort. And I also think it's clear by the number of people who have assigned the petition and the number of people that are watching this, this you know, forum today, that this place, the Byron Carlyle Theater, is special for a number of reasons. There's certainly the historic aspect to the physical structure, but I think that more than that, having a cultural center in the middle of a neighborhood, in the middle of an important community is, you know, it's a catalyst for building community, and that quality of life is a highly tangible thing. We tend to think, I think in this country, or let's say in the West, of the tangibles are, you know, how many apartments can we build, or how much retail activity is going on. And there's the value proposition is always registered in dollars, bottom line. And so I recognize that those things are important. I run a facility. I have to balance my budget, you know, all the time. And, but I think that it's a missed opportunity here if we don't, you know, capture the I don't know, the hearts and minds, the imaginations of the people who are going to make decisions about this, the elected officials, to get them to understand that that's no way to build community, is by giving away a very valuable piece of property with no parameters for how it later gets utilized. And so there are a number, I'm so out of my league. You know, I love listening to Robert because I learn lots of things from him. I certainly read, I'm certainly a part of the creative placemaking world, because creative placemaking grants from Art Place America, that's how we built the Lightbox. We got funding from the Knight Foundation, the Ford Foundation, from the NEA, and from Art Place America. And so we are a part of that, I don't know, a recent generation of people who are focusing on creative placemaking, and that the return on creative placemaking is enormous. The financial return, the community return, the quality of life return, right? And so that's what brought me to the table. And what I'm glad to see is that there are so many knowledgeable and passionate people, not only sort of on the screen in this forum, but also that have sort of tuned in to listen to this conversation, so that there can be a groundswell, because that's what this country is about, right? And that's how we get things done, is by mobilizing people to make change. So I'm looking forward to continuing to be a part of it. And yeah, I guess that's good for now.
Great.
I always have more to say, but I'll wait.
Well, thank you so much. And we will have time at the end for more comments and questions. We can answer all the listeners' questions, but thank you so much, Beth. And our next speaker is Roberto Espejo, who is a principal at C Studio, And he has been collaborating in architecture for over 35 years. And for 23 of those years, he had the distinct privilege of working with renowned architect Cesar Pelli. And during his tenure at Pelli Clark Pelli Architects, with his own design collaborative, C Studio, he's worked on projects from Malaysia to Mexico to Miami, where most notably he spent 12 continuous years working as senior associate in charge of the Arch Center for the Performing Arts, which is another amazing jewel of Miami and a real anchor. And so he has recently relocated here full-time, welcome, and is committed to be involved in community initiatives that can build placemaking. And so without further ado, let's welcome Roberto.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. It's an honor, actually, to be with all these great leaders in the community that I live here, worked here since '94, and kind of moved down here, for what was supposed to be a 30-month construction schedule. Caesar said, "Don't worry, Roberto, it's only going to be 30 months." And I said, "But Caesar, I've never been a full-time site rep on a project." He said, "Roberto, don't worry, no one's ever done this." So the Art Center was a giant kind of, as you could all imagine and lived, was a challenge. And before I go on, I just want to say, before I take this picture off, because this virtual screen has a risk of making my presentation feel like a fly landed on my head, and you guys won't hear what I'm saying because you're just like wondering if I have hair or not. But I just, when I was with Manning, I had we walked around, I must admit, I did not know what the Byron Carlyle was. So I said, before I go to the panel, I really want to kind of get my arms around this. I know very much about North Beach community, and I know a lot of things that are starting to kind of percolate both municipally and privately, and watching the growth, and had the privilege of being invited by Beth to go to an amazing Cuban concert at the band shelter that just blew my mind. I couldn't believe someone built a modern umbrella inside of that thing that doesn't touch the historical structure. So it actually, respects the past, and, is not an expression of like anything architectural. It's just an umbrella that keeps you from getting wet, right? So it's a really good idea, and it looks great, and it sounds great. So I'm going to take this thing off, but before I take it off, I took this picture, and when I put it as my virtual screen, it kind of went sideways. And I was thinking to myself, in architecture school, when our professors would look at your plans, and when they turned it to the side, took your drawings and turned it upside down, they said, "Well, I really like that." And that was kind of like, felt like the kiss of death. Like, I've been looking at this plan this way, and then you turn it around and it looked completely different, but often it worked. So when I went out to the Byron, I kind of did all this kind of looking at it online and Google earthing it and kind of street pedestrian viewing it, finally going there and feeling it and kind of sticking my head through the cracks of the door and kind of ripping one of the fire doors open, which Manning thought I was going to get attacked by rats or something because it was very wet and dark. And so I kind of closed it and walked around. I spent time after Manning left, and obviously this is very reminiscent. So I'm gonna take this virtual screen off because it's actually driving me crazy, because I sort of wish I had hair also. Oops, I don't think I can take it off now. That's going to be bad. Nobody is. Okay, well, you'll have to endure the fly on my head. So at the Arch Center, and I will say, with my 23-year tenure with Caesar, we worked with a lot of developers, from the get-go. Our first project was to build a condominium tower on top of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, which could have scared the out of anyone. Then to build a World Financial Center on the west side of the West Side Highway on a landfill in Wall Street, where it's dead in the weekends and after 6, and not the friendliest kind of neighborhood to live at the time, but it was part of this Battery Park kind of master plan, right? And I was talking to Beth earlier in the week, and I said, you know, it's really, and I'll get to the arch, but it was really interesting that, you know, Caesar said to the Reichman brothers, Canadian development group from Olympia, New York, from Canada, and he said, you know, to build 4 office buildings in front of the World Trade Center, to somehow connect it visually and kind of contextually and make it look good is really not what is going to make this thing successful. Architecture, we architects want to believe that we fix social problems and community problems, but and a lot of great ones are Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier at the end of their careers kind of really were obsessed with making architecture which was going to be meaningful and substantial for all of society. Like, you know, Corb's fascination with housing, Frank Lloyd Wright building a mile-high tower in Chicago, designing it so that the rest of Chicago would be just a park, which, you know, obviously you build a mile-high tower and someone builds a 1.5-mile tall tower next to it, and there's no parks. So the story of the winter, the 4 office buildings called the World Financial Center, Caesar said we need to have a room that gathers everyone, gives everyone an excuse to come here on the weekends and after 5. And I think it should be an Italian feeling plaza with palm trees and all this stuff. It's like, Caesar, this is New York City. And he says, well, we'll call it a winter garden, covered it over with glass. And that atrium is beautiful in itself, but it's not like you build it and they all came on their knees and they came and it was just an exciting place to happen, right? That place has a management group that has every single day, 365 days a year, there is an event going on in that thing. And it's interesting, I was in New York City today. I literally got in it right here at 5:45 and clicked on, but you know, Calatrava's kind of, dead whale is, I think it's called the Forum. My son and I, we're impressed by the architecture, and all of a sudden we look at it and there's no program, right? It doesn't feel like anything's going on in it. There's 5 kind of retail kiosks. So I just have to say that when we went to the art, so it's not architecture, and this building, you know, I looked at it and it kind of scratched my head, and I drove by it, and it's similar to the reaction I had and a lot of people had when we were given the trust, the county was given the Sears site in the Sears building, and Knight Ridder gave a property which was one of their 4 parking lots. Gave it away, and not in a great place. You know, we all wanted to build a performing arts center on the park, which at the end of the day would have been a terrible idea. You know, a performing arts center on the water surrounded by asphalt parking lots. And instead pulling it back into the urban context, kind of re-stimulated and kind of created a synergy that was, you know, the Omni district had its heyday. It had a great shopping center. Latinos would come and get their hotel room for a weekend and buy 10 pieces of luggage at the mall so that they can fill it up with clothes and go back to Mexico, Venezuela, wherever they were coming up to shop. And it was happening. They called it the Omni Arts District at the time. And nobody knew about the, you know, Wynwood, the design district, none of those things were alive. I-395 just chopped that whole neighborhood apart from the rest of downtown and hardly had any chance of breathing, right? And so it had to breathe forward and up. When people said to us, oh yeah, they gave us a Sears building, and a lot of people said, oh my God, I can't believe you're keeping that thing. And we're like, and then half of the people would say, oh my God, I can't believe you don't even think about getting rid of it. And so when I say that half the population, half of the people wanted to keep it, half of the people wanted it to go away. And I always say that we kept half. We kept the half that mattered. It was really a 4-story box with a hat on the corner. It was a stucco shopping center, or a not so significant architectural building, but they articulated the corner with some lovely Art Deco details, right? So we said, what do we do with this thing, right? Do we get rid of it 100%? or do we keep parts of it? And we found use, we programmed it. People don't realize this, but on the second floor, there is a air handling unit that pumps air down, sucks air out and pumps it back out, so that a south facing lobby with glass that's 70 feet by 120 feet does not boil the patrons when they go in there. And leaning the glass forward, putting sunshades, creating passive solar. I mean, there was so much that went into it. But you know, later we realized that, you know, I needed a program at the ground floor. And for a long time, it just had frosty windows, until another hero, programmer, a person that is a visionary in our community, Mitch Kaplan, decides to create Books and Books. You know, down the street from an amazing book fair that started out smallish 25 years ago when I started working on the Art Center, and now is world renowned, right? And he's got an anchor downtown, not at the beach, not at Coral Gables, but one downtown that he can, I know that Mitch knows that he's got this living room with the Parker Thompson sort of arts plaza that was meant to be the living room for Miami. These were two halls across the street from each other with a little studio theater and all of these components that had to kind of revolve. And Caesar said, it's not gonna be, it's gonna look like car dealerships facing each other, like blank buildings with glass lobbies across Biscayne Boulevard, if we don't create something that makes it kind of organized. So without getting into a history lesson of the Art Center, what was really interesting for me, I became quite passionate about the piece we were keeping, and started like looking at the detail, and kind of literally was the guy that had to go up and put yellow chalk on scaffolding with my guys, the restoration subcontractors, and what cracks were going to get filled in. How were we going to chop the way of a building that kind of fits across a whole city block and save that piece? And you know, structurally and pragmatically and programmatically and functionally, it served a lot of different purposes, but it didn't just say, save this old thing because it's old and we'll figure it out later. What we realized, and something that was really substantial about the Art Center, is that we weren't just talking to the Florida Grand Opera and Bob Hewer. We weren't just talking to Edward Villela at the Miami City Ballet. We were talking to, there were over 40 constituents, and a lot of them tiny. I remember Florine Nichols had this kind of African-American kind of young girls ballet troupe, right? And she cared so much of where her girls were gonna dance. And that provoked taking the studio theater from underneath the belly of the whale, somewhere inside of that building, and yanking it out to the corner of 14th and Biscayne Boulevard, so that when that little girl danced when she was 12, when she comes back from college, when she's 24 years old, and says, I had my first recital in that box right there. And my point is that saving, well, what I was gonna say is that those constituencies had really agendas for performing arts and what the needs were. Sightline, what kind of programming, cabaret, does it look good? Where can you sit acoustically? What it does it do? A theater on a U.S. federal highway on a flight path to MIA with ships that turn around and honk their horn every time they turn around, and like 6 feet under is water. It was the risk, it's the chance of being the worst site in the world for a performing arts center, right? But the one thing about the Sears building, and it relates to the Byron, is as we were listening to everyone for that week-long charrette, the 6-week presentation, and through the 6 years of design, no kidding, all the way through construction, we heard people saying, wow, you know, I remember buying that my father's Day tie at the Sears building. I remember when I blah, blah, blah. And having met this group, I hear all these stories about the Byron Carlyle, right? So as and you know, and the big criticism of Lincoln Road had all these mom and pop shops, and then all of a sudden, you know, the larger stores kind of came in and turned it into, you know, the more kind of current mall. One thing about the Byron Carlyle is that, you know, there's so much richness. I'm not going to tell you that architecturally the building is super rich and we're going to turn it into this amazing world-class performance space, or even back to a good theater, like to watch movies. But memories and memory in contextual architecture, years from now, North Beach is not going to look the same as it was 20 years back, right? But these little moments in the urban fabric, like you're going to go by them and you're going to go, oh my God, that's the Byron car. Are we really on X Street and X Street? Because like there's all these 15-story buildings around me and I don't really, oh my God, there's the band shelter. Oh my God, the Carlyle must be right there. That is so important. And whether we keep this building or keep remnants of the building or keep a replica of the building or keep a scale version, I want to believe that there's I believe there's schemes A through J, or just in my month really getting my arms around this, there's 15 schemes and alternatives, and they're not architectural. They're talking to the community. They're talking to theater. I've already talked to the acoustician and theater planner from the Arch Center, the second generation, the equivalent of me, the Cesar Pelli senior guys at Artec and Fisher Dax. They are interested in taking a look, and they have been down at the Coconut Grove Playhouse consulting for a while. They're called Stages Consultants. I've talked to Richard Heisenbottle, who helped me restore the Sears building. Talked to even AMS Theater, like this group of consortium of people, experts that go into these things, not building shiny, fancy performing arts centers all over the world, but go into causes that matter. And they do a very careful study. This is not about chaining ourselves to this building because it's this or nothing. Because the preservationists tried to do that at the Sears building. I'll tell you a story that when it's not a historical registered building, right? So the preservationist says, you got to keep the whole thing. And Caesar said, well, what if we can't keep the whole thing because we've got to build a ballet opera house there? He says, well, you know, if you don't keep the whole thing, it's not even worth keeping it at all. And Caesar is a gentleman. He doesn't like to corner anyone, but he said, so you're telling me that in your mind, if I don't keep the whole thing, it's okay to tear it all down. And then they went, no, that's not exactly what I said, right? So what I wanted to express, and as you can imagine, I can kind of go on and on and on. 12 years of my life kind of really navigating a project that I think kind of helped launch the cultural revolution in Miami. When that was built, lots of other cultural kind of moves happened. I think that Beth and I the other day had a debate about how much more it should be doing for the community, and that we have, and it's doing an amazing thing, but my God, it's a tall order. It's an amazing place. But there's a lot, and this community can't lose attention span, and they should absolutely refocus, reinitiate these ideas. Look at this panel of people just here. I believe that this is an absolutely worthy cause to investigate data, research, put energy into this, grab experts, don't just hearsay, don't just have people like turn this into a polarized society where developers are like, you know, threatening me saying, what are you doing? You know, I want to build my thing here. We worked with developers for, you know, Caesar did until he was 92 years old and managed to sort of create a synthesis of community important things and all that stuff. So that's what I just wanted to kind of share with you all and offer. It's just a beginning conversation, and I'm really glad to be part of it. And you know, I want you guys to all rely on me as a resource. So, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Roberto. That was amazing to hear about the background of the Arch, which, like you said, became really the hub of culture for downtown Miami. And so I'll look forward to learning more about that too during this process. So I know we're running a little bit over time, but We want to hear from our last and final speaker. And in the meantime, please add any of your questions or comments, the audience, to the Q&A. And so our final speaker, we're honored to have Gregory Von Hausch, who is the Broward County, the president and CEO of the Broward County Film Society. And he has a bachelor's in fine arts in theater and directing from University of Florida. He has done so many things, from the National Endowment for the Arts Theater Panel, and was the executive director of Broward County Film Society. And also is, as of 2019, Gregory celebrated his 30th year as director of the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival, and that is the second largest tenure in the nation. So Gregory, I know you have some insights into redevelopment, community investment, and thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm going to just try to go through some things that we did in my theater career, developing, renovating, and creating spaces. I founded the Hippodrome State Theater in Gainesville in 1973, and we were just a bunch of hippies at the time, working out of a plumbing warehouse, and then we moved to a bigger warehouse. And then the city came to us in Gainesville and said, we have this 1909 Beaux Arts Classic post office building, and if you guys could take it over, we'd all be for it, but you have to raise all the money. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful building, 3 floors and a basement. So we went, I went to the Washington, I got it placed on the National Registry of Historic Buildings. I wrote an NEA challenge grant. We won that and put, in 1978, put $1.2 million into it, which was a lot of money back then. And then, am I still with you? And so, so we renovated that space. It's still going strong. And then in 1989, I got the offer to come down and take over the Film Society in Fort Lauderdale on the film festival. So we didn't have a place there to stay at all. And we would move, we were like nomadic, and we'd move from place to place. We'd use the AMC theaters. And then Vinette Carroll, who was a friend of mine from the theater world, she had a building that was an old church built in 1940s, downtown Fort Lauderdale, and she was in failing health, and the building was just going to hell. So we came over and took co-leasing it with her, and I wrote a Florida Cultural Arts Facility grant, and we put about $1.5 million into this little 200-seat theater and renovated it, and it's still going strong. It's now called Savor Cinema. It was Cinema Paradiso Lauderdale. Then the city of Hollywood came to me and said, if you will do the same thing in Hollywood, we'll give you a grant of $300,000, which for us was a lot of money, but I still had to go out and raise the money to build a space. So we found a more or less a storefront space, about 3,000 square feet in Hollywood. It's just a square, rectangular, long, narrow building. And went out and got the business community with us. We had a development in every sector that you can imagine, bringing doctors, architects. Everybody had a different committee. We raised the money to do that. We created Cinema Paradiso Hollywood. And what we did, and I think what Manning wanted me to talk about, was working with the CRA. The CRA came up with the $300,000, which they dole out to us in $30,000 installments every year for 10 years. They went to the beach district, which has a lot of money, as opposed to the downtown where the building is, and said, we'll give you $3,000 in tickets every year. If you give us $30,000 that year, we can give to the theater, and we'll shuttle people from the beach downtown to see films. So we go 7 days a week with films, and all day, all night. And it's been a great relationship, and we're right there, and so much has happened around us. Just like in Fort Lauderdale with the Sabre Cinema, there was nothing around us except for Bell Bond's house and a parking garage, and now we're surrounded by apartments. Restaurants are popping up, and the same thing was true in downtown Gainesville with it. So what I'm trying to say is it was culture that brought the people and business and the excitement to the area. It wasn't the reverse. It wasn't apartments. It was the culture, and the theater and what we created there was the catalyst to bring people down. So I know you're running short of time, but that's basically the drill of what I did. And I built 7 theaters, 6 of them from the ground up, and renovated the Sabre Cinema. And,
well, thank you so much, Greg, and to all the panelists. I think, as usual, Nancy has assembled a dream team. I did want to ask some questions, and you all could take yourself off mute if you'd like to answer, but here was an interesting one that I've had a lot of people ask me as well. And so this person said, so why not keep the building but allow developers to bid to build on top of the building and take some of the profits to subsidize the Byron Carlyle as an art space? And this person wrote, actually, that's a model of Olympia Theater in Miami, first floor theater, and then offices or residence above. And I don't know, maybe Robert, if you would want to take that as far as, since you were mentioned, Olympia Theater was mentioned.
Sure. You know, I want to, my group inherited the Olympia and the business format that was laid in there. And it points to the ways of thinking. You work with what you've got when you've got it. So the concept of the Olympia as a performance venue not being able to pay for itself with just revenues from the center itself. In the 90s, there was an attempt to hit 2 targets: get people to live downtown in Miami, and provide some level of subsidy for the theater. At the time, there's a phrase that I'm mindful of, a redevelopment person from way back. I think everybody was sort of looking at their shoes and didn't really see the potential that downtown Miami had. So affordable housing was the target for the tower above the theater itself. And as you can imagine, the revenue spin-off from that was not substantial enough to make a dent in the typical losses that a performing arts center incurs. So that didn't work as well as it should have. And you know, the community found itself with a facility that was still not able to take care of itself financially. Speaking of the concept of having a public type of use facility on the first floor and a more privatized or a more commercial aspect above it, yes, as a model, that's a very valid model. I'll go back to my earlier remarks that it's great in all of these discussions, especially early on, to come up with all these great ideas, but there is a level of planning and understanding need in a community, and that isn't just for cultural arts, it's about anything. So that what you wind up with is something that will stick around and last. You know, there's an anecdotal story from a long time ago that I'm quickly trying to anonymize. A community we worked in, you know, a great group wanted to preserve their part of downtown. They were really gung-ho on it, and their vision was to have a nice tea shop in their downtown. But after looking at demographics and availability and the types of businesses stuff there, they were far more of a Pepsi drinking, pickup riding, gun rack in the back kind of population. So tea room, probably, as much as everybody, these ladies wanted it, it was not going to be the best fit. But they did wind up with a really great Southern cooking cafe at the heart of their community by the time we got to the end of the community. So understanding what you've got to work with, understanding your community, and understanding what your community needs is an important part. And that's something that too often gets overlooked, especially in throwing out an RFP proposal. We have a piece of dirt, we got this thing, the city owns it, let's put it out there, let's see what we can get for it. Even with a carve out of 10,000 square feet of space for cultural use, is that the right amount of space for North Beach? I don't think anybody even knows until you start to dig into what's there. So even though the city thought enough to carve out space for cultural arts, was it enough? Is it the right kind? And there were no restrictions on what that space had to be. So there's opportunity to take something that has a treasure for the entire community and turn it into something that's amazing for the town center vision of your master plan, and using your CRA to help guide that process and make sure it happens in a way that is for the community and the neighborhood. So that's my bit.
Thank you. And I don't know if anyone from the North Beach organization wants to chime in, maybe Manning. Is that something that your group is supportive of, if it were properly planned, you know, via charrette, and if there was like affordable, and I think the bid does say affordable housing in this version. I'm not an expert though on that RFP, but Manning, please share your thoughts.
Well, I just think that that we have to stop giving away our valuable public lands to developers. This is a property that's owned by North Beach, owned by all of us, and it's something that we should, you know, it has value and we shouldn't just give it away. I think the cultural space that's planned in the one RFP that we have is 10,000 square feet. The theater right now is 38,000 square feet. It's much larger. You know, we don't want to lose control of what's going to happen there. We don't really know, once we give the land away, how it's going to develop and what it's going to turn into. Also, I think that maintaining a theater at that scale on 71st Street, when we have contemplated in front of it a 22-story building. On one side, we have a 14-story building. On the other side, we're going to have another high-rise, is a way to create an opening and a kind of a place where people can come together that won't be the same if we just build another condo. So I think we have enough condos. We have a structure that is historic, and because of its design, if we can preserve part of its design, is important. And I think that's what we should go to. I think that you know, giving away public land to a developer to build a bunch of condos, especially you know, micro units, is not what we need for the neighborhood. We have to also consider our infrastructure, our roads, and what we have the capacity to support. And you know, so I think that what the community wants and overwhelmingly supports, and you can see it from the petition, is trying to maintain whatever we can, both in scale and in the structure, you know, what we have now in the Byron Carlyle.
Thank you. Okay, we have probably time for one or two more questions if our panelists are okay with saying a little bit over time. And thank you all again for your time at the end of, I'm sure, a long day. So we have a question that says, do we know what the city is seeking from the project other than property taxes? And also, what are the remaining historic elements of the Byron Carlyle? Because it does appear to be significantly altered. And do we know enough about the community needs to be confident that the existing structure can accommodate a dynamic new cultural facility in North Beach? So
well, I think, I just want to say that there's a group of us, you know, some of them are on this panel, but it's a very broad group of people from the arts world, and you know, people in architecture and running theaters. And what we're describing to the city, what we're trying to propose to the city, is a process precisely to try to understand what is in the building, what you know, what possibilities it has for being fixed, and then going through a process similar to what Robert has described to kind of figure out, you know, what the community needs and what kind of program we can put there that's going to be successful. We're doing a visit of the theater on Wednesday. Roberto is going to be coming. We're going to have some engineers and other people who have experience in fixing older buildings. And after we do that, we'll have a better idea of what the possibilities are for the building. And then if we go through and we try to analyze what we could put there, I think that's the process we're trying. So we don't have all the answers now, but we know the questions we need to ask, and we know what we want in the end, which is some sort of cultural center in the center, in the town center, that's going to help revitalize the town center, that's going to help produce jobs and growth and be a destination, something where families can go, where people can come. And we're confident. And then if you look at the people who are involved in this, the different cultural organizations, that we can provide the right type of programming to fill the location and to make it something that's going to be a significant benefit. You know, when you look at, you know, some of the things that Gregory was describing happened when theaters were brought into areas of town that were needed to be revitalized, the impact that they had, that's what we believe is going to happen when we build a better Byron Carlyle.
Great, thank you. Well, I think there's one question remaining about asbestos. Maybe what? Oh, Mireille, did you have a comment? And if you could take yourself off mute. Let me see. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, now
Also,
you're off mute.
Okay. Also, we have to be very clear also with the city of Miami Beach, you know, well, the way that they give us the theater, who is going to manage it? It could be their building and they are managing it, and we are there just like you have a director. Because the same problem we had in Little Haiti. I'm talking about the city of Miami. I cannot talk for Miami Beach. I don't know how they operate. Our team left the theater, you know, to build not a theater, to build a cultural center for the Haitian. I don't know, it was $63 million. And there is a market that is in the front that was supposed to be restored and make a whole thing for art and dance and everything, and also the market that was closed forever. While they built the facility for us, first of all, they only did the new part, and it was only 23 million. Okay, we didn't touch the other part. So now the next thing that had happened, the complex is built, and now nobody knows anything because they gave it to the park department to run the community center. Okay, so my foundation, Edouard Duval-Carrier and I, we have a foundation that is next to the cultural center. So we have voluntarily, we agreed to help them, because at that time we had Commissioner Spence Jones, you know, it was different kind of commissioner that we have now. And it was just like such a thing to make this thing come up, because as it was directed or occupied by the park department, they had no budget allocation to give us. So there is no money for program, no money for maintenance. You have one person who has to clean the whole complex, the outside and whatever, one Haitian girl. Do you understand? The building has never been repainted yet. Since what, 10 years already? It was before the earthquake of Haiti. And it's just like Edouard and I, we are just like managing it. There is, nobody to make it. And we try to open, like myself, I did open a lot of doors for now. The BAS is doing some program there. Pam is doing some program there. And, different. And we have the dance now that Manny had on the talk with us, with them. And certain thing that we have a theater there. We cannot even use it because it's so expensive and there is no money to make it work. So we have to be very clear when we are talking about what they will be what will be the deal. If it is because they just give us a building and there's no money, and if you go and get money, somebody give you a donation, you have to give it to the city, because you cannot take it if you don't have a foundation. So how do they get a tax write-off if somebody, let's say, is very interested to make this happen for the Carlyle, to revive it and for it to continue? It's if it is not an institution who run that place, that is a non-profit, we will never have that opportunity to get donation. This is the same thing we had with Vizcaya, and now we are getting all the money, and you know, and it's running, and we are running the nonprofit very well. That was a little parenthesis that I wanted to tell you.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
thank you. I think that, you know, it's so important that there's a plan developed, that there's community buy-in. I love what Roberto was talking about identifying elements of the history, of the significance of the building, and that connection to the memory of the site, which it could be just as important as the building. So I wanted to thank everyone for watching. Maybe last note by Nancy Liebman, our fearless leader, if you can. And also those who are leaving, please take the survey. You'll see a survey when you close out of Zoom. And we need those for our great grants that we get from the county and other places. So Nancy, I think you have to unmute.
Unmute. I am so thrilled with what I hear, and I have such a feeling that we're going to do it. I think there is so much passion here that the city will ultimately understand what's happening. I think it's going to take a little refreshing of the memory of how the Art Deco district started from nothing. And it was because of a community that worked together and made it happen. That is the kind of sense that I get for the Byron. As I mentioned before, my children grew up here. We lived here for lived there in North Beach for many years, and it was the center of Miami Beach. We need to bring back that kind of sentiment. And I thank everybody who spoke. You were all brilliant, as I've been describing it to anybody who would listen. So thank you. You'll hear from us again, and we hope that you'll join us at everything. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great night. Thanks again.